You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Silver Screen Science. This is a series we do here at Common Descent where we discuss the science in movies, not just the nitpicky, what did they technically get right or wrong, but the broader concept of how science and scientists and scientific concepts are portrayed on the silver screen. For the month of April 2025, this year's Silver Screen Science series is Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
We will be releasing 3 episodes examining 3 different takes on the Planet of the Apes concept, starting with this episode on the original Planet of the Apes movie from 1968, directed by Franklin J. Schaffner, starring Charlton Heston and a bunch of other people. One of the most famous movies of all time.
Yeah, a pillar of sci-fi.
Yes, this is a classic film in the genre. This episode, we will talk about all of the fascinating science that there is to discuss with Planet of the Apes. We will not be talking much about our personal thoughts about the movie, which are overwhelmingly positive. If you'd like to hear that, we will be releasing an episode of More Thoughts on our Patreon for our patron subscribers, where you can hear us just geek out about the movie itself.
Yes.
Before we go any further, this, dear listeners, is your official spoiler warning. We will be discussing this film in all of its various detail, so if you don't like being spoiled and you've somehow made it this far without finding out what happens in Planet of the Apes, you have been warned. We're gonna spoil everything.
It's been a busy past, 50, 60 years? How many?
It's a long time. Will, please tell us what happens in this movie.
Happily. This film starts with a bunch of astronauts on a mission to an unknown planet. They're going off to a planet at a distant star and go into, cryogenic sleep for the long journey and wake up to their ship crashing in water and come out to realize 2,000 years have passed, and on this planet, humans are unspeaking wild animals, and apes rule the world and run a society where humans are treated like a wild animal and kept in zoo-like cages and displays in museums, and they are captured and throw the society into chaos as talking, thinking human, because only one really makes it.
Yeah, and then the movie becomes this main Charlton Heston's character engaging with and interacting with and fighting against this society of apes that he finds himself in. This movie, notably, based on a book, 1963, which I read the synopsis of the book, and it is quite different. It has its own fun twist.
Oh.
That is pretty cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, now
I read the synopsis, so it's been spoiled for me.
I need to read that book now, because that's like some of my favorite stuff is old sci-fi stories like that. So, I didn't know that.
Typically, in a Silver Screen Science episode, we would begin by talking about the creatures in the movie in question, because that's often what the focus is on. We're still going to do that. Let's start with creatures. There's just not a whole lot of creature stuff to talk about here.
Yeah, they don't show a lot of wildlife. Like the apes have horses.
Yeah, horses, ape, and human are really the 3. There's plants.
Yeah, I think we hear some animal noises a couple times, but we don't see anything else. They don't have any livestock or anything.
So the humans in this film, the humans on the Planet of the Apes, are depicted as wildlife, basically, in much the same way that we would imagine monkeys or apes on Earth now. Yeah. That they're gathered in groups, they're sort of crouching and moving through the grass, they're collecting food or whatever out there. They don't talk to each other, which notably is different from primates.
Yeah, they're
in
not
the wild.
These are not just that they can't speak English, which everyone else on the planet speaks.
Yes, they're mute.
They're fully mute.
They make no, even when they're being attacked.
Yeah.
And stuff. They don't shout. They're completely silent.
Yeah. So like they definitely are communicating. Like there's one scene where one person is distributing food to other humans. So like they have a community. They're curious. They rifle through the astronauts' stuff.
Yeah, they also will communicate with each other by facial expressions, things like that.
So like it's definitely a interesting the fact that they are fully mute is an interesting feature of how they made them animalistic humans, quote unquote.
Yeah, well, it is taking away one of the core things that makes humans human. Is the language, the ability to communicate.
Yeah, and so there's never an explanation given as to exactly what happened to humans.
Right.
But that something happened to humans that caused them to, I don't remember if the movie uses the word regress, but that's kind of the portrayal, is that something happened and humans were forced back into the wild.
Yes. Spoilers, it's Earth.
It's Earth.
They're on Earth.
You blew it up.
You blew it up. Darn you. Darn you to heck. This is a far in the future Earth, which is the reveal at the very end of the movie.
Yes.
One of the most famous movie spoilers of all time.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
It is the final, 20 seconds of this movie is one of the most famous movie scenes of all time.
Yep. That's still image.
It's hard to avoid the spoiler for this one.
Well, like if you've seen any other sci-fi thing, it is very likely that you've seen one. Did you watch Spaceballs? Well, they spoiled it for you.
Now, the humans being very animalistic is in contrast to the apes.
Yes.
Who wear clothes and walk around upright. They are very, they're people in costumes. So this movie, their portrayal of the apes is not attempting to, they didn't ask the humans in the costumes to act like apes.
Yeah, like they definitely changed their posture a bit.
Yeah,
like
there's
they're
a
bit
little
more hunched.
I noticed in one scene where one of the characters is sitting down and pushes themselves up off the table, but pushes with the wrists in a very sort of ape-like way.
Yeah, like the way they gesture, they often have the hands kind of up closer to the chest and stuff. So they're putting a little bit of that ape pantomime in, but it's not like Andy Serkis in his ape school.
Yes. For the most part, they're just humans, but with their apes.
Yes.
They are standing upright, they're wearing clothes, they have a whole functioning society. They are all referred to as apes, although there are chimps, gorillas, and orangutans.
Yeah, it's the great apes, which is a neat thing that they didn't do like Planet of the Apes and there's monkeys and it is actually the great apes.
Yes. And they all have different roles in their society. It is interesting that the movie doesn't really ever lean into any special abilities.
No.
They're not super strong.
Yeah.
They're not shown climbing around or anything. They're just acting like humans.
Yeah, and in fact, the humans are absolutely treated as the more dangerous organism and shown to be able to be quite effective physically. While the apes cower when
Taylor's running through the town, I guess, the apes are like, ah.
It'd be like if a chimpanzee got out in a town.
So, yeah, the apes in this movie, it's very funny because it's sort of the opposite of what we normally talk about on Silver Screen Science, of taking a normal animal and then turning it into a movie monster.
Yes.
This movie makes almost zero effort to make the apes animalistic or monstery at all.
Yeah.
And instead makes them as human as possible.
Yeah, they're not even climbing stuff.
Nope.
They
don't walk on their knuckles.
Yeah.
They're just humans.
Yeah.
Which is part of the point.
Yeah, exactly.
The point is that the roles have been reversed. The apes are in charge and the humans are in the wild.
Yeah, the humans are moving around much more in a crouched and on all fours position and stuff.
Yes. Well, and I think it's interesting that the humans aren't depicted as savage culture.
Yeah.
They're just out in the wild.
And
they're wearing the simple clothing of, like you might picture in a stereotypical
caveman loincloths.
Caveman or hunter-gatherer kind of thing. but they're really shown to be like, they don't have society, they don't have culture, they're just sort of a little troop that runs around.
Yeah. But yeah, they're not savage in the fact, like...
They're not like in King Kong.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they actually seem to be pretty communicative and, like, working together. And the only time we ever see aggression between them is when Taylor's being a jerk.
Yes. Which is most of the movie.
Most of the movie.
This is not a great person.
And so, like, there's not a lot of monstrifying other than, like, the apes being very callous.
Yes.
And uncaring toward the plight...
Yes.
And health or safety of the humans.
And indeed, the apes within the movie treat the humans as monsters, partly because that is how they are taught to receive them, but also partly, as it is revealed ultimately throughout the movie, because the apes in charge know of some of the reality of human history and know that humans are destructive.
Yes.
Because, again, this is sort of the... well, it's not the subtext, it's explicitly stated as you get toward the end of the movie, the reason that the world has become all weird is because humans messed it up.
Yeah, like the astronauts have to trek across a barren desert because we irradiated and blew it up and made it a desolate wasteland. And the apes have enough history from back then, from like the earliest rising up of their ancestors, that they were aware that humans were the reason the world was ruined. So they wrote down in their religion, don't allow man to rise back up.
Yes.
Keep their numbers low. Keep them in the jungles. If they are allowed to run free, they will ruin your world.
Yes.
Which is a very interesting, that it's not just purely... ew, gross, a thing that's different than me, which most of the apes, that's the case, because they don't know that secret.
Yes.
But some of them, it is a very active, I do not trust these animals.
Yes, exactly. So we've got creatures. Also, there's horses, and they're just normal horses.
Yep, just normal horses. All black.
They are all black, that's
all
true.
black horses.
They are all dark horses.
There was a bottleneck at some point in horse genome, and all the other colors died.
That's a horse of the same color. Moving on from creatures, getting more into some of the things we were just talking about, this movie, and this is something that I was able to appreciate this time, this movie is full of scientists.
It is.
Almost every character in the movie of any consequence is a scientist.
Yeah, all the main speaking characters are science-related or scientists.
Yes, or a child.
Yes,
one of them's a kid. So, like Will said before, the movie begins with a group of astronauts crash landing on the planet. There are 4 astronauts in the ship, 3 of whom matter.
Yep.
One of them, she dies. That is the only thing she does in this movie.
We see her sleeping, and then we see her dead.
Yes. The other 3, the guys, survive and go off to explore the planet. They are Taylor, Charlton Heston, who is the mission commander, and there's Landon and Dodge. They are all, the implication is that they're all scientists, because they refer to themselves as Dr. Landon and Dr. Dodge, and Dr. Stewart is the one who didn't make it. Although it isn't explained, like, what they do.
Yeah, they never say a field, they never say what studies, or they never make any, like, comments that are like, oh, okay, you're supposed to be the geologist, because you're, you're commenting on this stuff.
They have equipment. Like, Dodge early in the movie is, like, using equipment to, like, get a reading on the area.
We see some broken equipment that looks like soil samples or something, like sediments falling out of it.
But these are a group of astronauts. They also aren't, there does not seem to be any problem with the fact that one of them died.
Yeah.
There's not really a moment where they're like, well, now we can't do this science because one of our... To be fair, the mission went completely off the rails immediately.
Yeah.
These 3 characters are also very interesting scientist characters, because 2 of them both seem like they don't want to be here.
Very grouchy. Which, understand, you're stranded on what you think is an alien world. I'd be a bit grouchy too.
Absolutely. And yeah, your ship crashed, and you can't do what you came here to do.
But it's intriguing because it has a little bit of the Martian moment where they're like, all right, well, this is the situation we're in.
Yeah, I do appreciate that they at no point do any of them freak out.
Yeah.
Which is something that I often will criticize in a movie where it's, you have your group of astronauts or your group of military personnel or whatever, and then something goes wrong and they all start freaking out.
Yep.
And, but these people are, in real life, highly trained to deal with crisis situations.
Well, and especially for astronauts, especially for a mission like this, you all had to have made peace with the fact that you're very likely going to die because space.
Yes.
Like you're leaving our planet
dangerous
to another star. There are so many reasons that you very likely could die. So the idea that you would fall apart at the first crisis just isn't realistic. And they all feel very like they definitely have a moment where they're bickering and stuff, but then they're like, all right, well, I even love that. Which way do we go? That way, because we have to go. And
gotta
why?
Go some way.
No reason.
Yep. It's also, there's a line that implies that they volunteered for this mission.
Yeah, exactly.
Taylor says that to Landon. He's like, you volunteered for this mission. Why did you come along? And they have like a little like, why are you here? Which is also kind of weird, that the idea that you didn't get to know each other before setting off on this mission.
It does. It definitely has some of that vibe that they've just, when we saw them asleep and Charlton Heston makes his intro speech about has Earth stopped being terrible.
Yes.
That's all that's happened on the spaceship before.
It's just Charlton Heston monologuing about how much he hates humanity.
And that you all met when you got to the spaceship.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Dodge is described, because they have in that scene where they're talking about why did you come on this mission? I think one of them describes Dodge as him. I understand why he's here. He'll do anything to learn something new.
He would walk into an active volcano if he thought he could learn something no one else has.
Yes, he would walk naked into an active volcano, I think is the line. Which is a very, like, scientist kind of... I mean, it's tropey, but also in, like, a relatively nice way.
Yes.
Like, a very realistic, like, you're driven by learning and knowledge.
Discovery. And also for the mission they're doing in the movie of going to a planet around another star, absolutely it makes sense that you would have people like that are, I'm perfectly fine if I die if it furthers knowledge, because you kind of have to have a little bit of that mentality to leave your planet, most likely forever, even if you survive.
Go to another solar system, because Charlton Heston makes a comment at some point about, like, this was always going to be a one-way trip.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they say it's a star in the Orion constellation, and that it's some planet there. They don't give the planet a name.
No. Because it already has a name.
Yeah, right.
As we learn later. Other than that, we don't really get to know... These three human scientists don't really do much sciencing. Dodge takes some measurements, and Landon and Taylor argue about the validity of the scientific theory of how time dilation works.
Yep.
Because Taylor's like, we've only been gone a year, but 2,000 years has passed according to our clock. And Landon's like, it's still just a theory.
Yep.
Which is another one of those weird things, like, you joined on this, on this mission, despite not believing in the science that is underpinning it.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of those where, and that, like, they present it as, he does it in his little speech at the beginning, that it's a recent hypothesis that moving at a particular speed of light, and so that this mission was partially to try to measure and test that.
Right.
So it's presented as a new, like, we don't actually know this is how it works, but yeah, it is weird how, like, combative he is.
Yeah.
Of like, well, but surely you were briefed that if this is true, that will mean you will have been gone for millennia.
Yes. That being said, I do think that what they are perhaps trying to capture there is that, like, scientific debate.
Yeah,
we're
maybe
on the frontier of new ideas in science. We're setting out to prove whoever's theory. So there is a kernel of, like, real scientific discussion within those conversations. And to be fair to the grouchy dudes, they've had a bad day.
They have a real bad day.
It's been a real hard day.
Their clothes are wet.
Yeah, they landed in the water. Their socks are wet.
They gotta walk.
They're so happy when they finally get to a lake.
Yes. One of my favorite little moments of what feels very like astronaut-y, for lack of a better term, is when they finally get on shore and they're like taking stock of their supplies and they're listing off, and he's like, we've got, I think he says 4 days. Something like 4 days, this will last us 4 days. And then I think it's Dodge that says, how long's a day?
Yes.
And I was like, that's great, because you're on a new planet. How long's a day?
Yes. And no one, there was never an answer to that.
Yep.
Because it's like, yeah, we don't know. Besides the human scientists, there are also 3 main characters who are ape scientists.
Ape scientists.
We've got Dr. Zira, who is as she is described in the movie, an animal psychologist.
Yes.
Who studies humans.
Yep.
Those are the animals that she studies. And she seems to be in charge of, like, this captivity area where they have specimens of humans that they've taken out of the wild.
Yeah.
The movie starts, the dudes off the ship end up mixed in with a group of wild humans when they get attacked and they're being captured by the apes.
Yes.
So Dr. Zira, animal psychologist. Dr. Zira's boyfriend?
Fiance.
Fiance, that's right, they are fiance. Dr. Cornelius, who is an archaeologist.
Yeah.
Who is working on, he's like, got theories. He is investigating the history of the area and doing archaeological digs.
Yep.
And then Dr. Zaius.
Dr. Zaius.
Dr. Zaius, who is an orangutan, who isn't a scientist in the same way as like he's practicing something. Dr. Zaius is the minister of science and the keeper of the faith.
Yes.
So he is like a politician. He is in this sort of governmental position.
He oversees the scientists. So like both Dr. Zira and Cornelius report to him.
Yes.
And he is the one that can okay or deny when they want to do certain research and stuff.
Yes. Dr. Zira and Dr. Cornelius are both pretty good scientist characters.
Fantastic.
Like, they're fun. They're fun characters. But they're also, like, driven by the urge to learn things, and they're, like, comparing notes. Dr. Zira gets a hold of Taylor, who... Taylor got shot in the throat, so he can't talk for a little while.
Yeah.
And so she starts to notice that there's something different about him, and she brings in Dr. Cornelius to be like, hey, you're working on, like, studying the history of humans and apes. Here's a human that is different and unusual that might contribute to your theories.
Yeah, well, because one of his hypotheses is that some of his evidence shows evidence of ancient ancestors of apes, and that apes may have evolved from a lesser primate, humans.
Yes, exactly.
And
the idea of a human that can communicate or it has a higher cognitive functioning. Dr. Zero was like, hey, this could be, they actually call him the missing link.
Yes, they do. That he could be the missing link that his research has been suggesting. And yeah, it's neat because I like the way they have Zira like discover him, because it's that he's trying to talk. And
yes, because he is.
Because he's attempting to, but he can't.
Injured.
But they can tell that, and she's intrigued by it, whether it's mimicking or not. It's behavior none of the other humans have ever done.
Yes.
But I also like when we see her interacting with the other humans she's interacted with, because she has certain humans that she has been interacting with and is trying to get certain behaviors out of.
Yes.
And it actually feels very, like, it's done in a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Dystopian way.
Sure, we'll get into that.
Yep. But it still feels very much like, well, yeah, when researchers researching animals get to know the animals,
yes,
have rapport and relationships with the individual animals very often.
She gives them names.
Yes.
She gives Taylor a name. She calls him Bright Eyes. And she's like, oh, this one's special. And then when he's being mistreated by other people in the society, she's defending him. She's like, well, don't mistreat him. She acts like she's got this rapport with these animals, very much like animal researcher as well.
And she's still treating them like animals.
Yes.
But she is actively kind. She is never actively cruel.
Yes. She is the nicest ape
Yes.
that we see interacting with humans.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I like that she brings in Dr. Cornelius and she says, there's something special about this human. And Cornelius's response is like, come on now.
Yeah.
He's like, come on, they're humans.
Yeah.
You're getting too attached to
them. You know the
them.
old saying, human see, human do.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and it's on the one hand, it's very much this trope of the scientist who is stuck in their ways of like, no, I refuse to believe it. But he's also doing a very real scientist thing of, well, what are the other hypotheses?
Yes.
Like, you're suggesting something that flies in the face of everything we already know. How else could we explain it?
Yep.
Yeah, it's just mimicry, or he's just putting on a show. He's trying to get attention. It's not that he can actually communicate.
Yeah, and he does that throughout their interactions, which I actually really enjoy. He very much embodies the extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof.
Yes, because as Taylor starts proving that he is more than they expect him to be,
once they finally give him pieces of paper to write with,
Dr. Zier is like, whoa, he's writing words. And Cornelius is like, okay, he can write, but that doesn't prove that he can think.
Well, yeah, at first he's like, this is a trick.
Yes,
like,
he says it's a trick.
He learned that someone taught him this. But then as he keeps making coherent sentences and responding to what he says.
Yes.
I love one moment he goes, all right, maybe he can think, but he's obviously insane.
Yes. Well, because that's the other thing is Taylor is explaining, we came here from another planet. We landed in a spaceship. And Cornelius is like, come on.
Sure you did, buddy.
Yes, exactly. That's made up. You can't do... There's even a point in... Oh, I forget. I think it's Cornelius who has a comment where he says, what? Flight is impossible.
Yeah.
He says,
that
you
is
can't.
A scientific impossibility.
That is a scientific impossibility, which is, he's just right on that line of realistic scientific credulity and that tropey...
Stubborn science.
Yeah, that stubbornness of like, oh, science has an answer to this.
Yes.
We know this can't be true.
Well, and the reason I like him as this scientist trope is because he is definitely has a foot in kind of both. But consistently through the movie, he yields to proof and yields to evidence.
Yes.
And adjusts. Like, there doesn't have to be some big dramatic moment where he goes, my God, I've been wrong this entire time.
Right.
It's like, no.
He goes, oh, he's talking now.
He's just...
Okay.
He's just a bit more... He's the kind of the holdout person.
Yes.
Where that's very much how he feels is it's not that I'm just going to disagree with everything, but it's going to take a couple extra steps before I agree.
Yes. Which puts him in contrast to our third ape scientist, Dr. Zaius, who... for a while seems like the trope of I refuse to change my beliefs. That sort of scientific dogmatism.
Yes.
Of like, I will never be convinced otherwise.
I already decided what was true the first time you told me about this.
Yes.
No new evidence will sway me.
He is very dismissive of their claims. And then as the movie goes on, we see that he's not only dismissive of their claims, he is actively trying to undermine them and hide their evidence.
Yeah, he's covering it up.
He's covering it up because it turns out he knows that they're right.
Yeah.
He knows that there's more to the history than this, and he wants Taylor to be destroyed.
Yes.
Before he can undermine the society and lead to humans coming back.
Yeah. Which is a great twist because it's very believable.
Yes.
But then also, because when initially it's seen that he's covering things up, my first time seeing it, I thought he was like, it was scientific rivalry or like, this study is too, this or it counters my stuff sort of thing. But then it is full on conspiracy.
Yes,
it's government conspiracy.
Absolutely. And Taylor calls him out at one point where he says, yeah, you're the minister of science and the keeper of the faith. And Dr. Zaius says there is no conflict between science and faith in our society.
True science.
True science, yes.
He clarifies true science.
And so he actually ends up being more the trope, and I do trope in quotation marks because this is a reference to things that have happened in real life, of a person using the veneer of science to uphold and maintain spiritual beliefs or societal, cultural beliefs that they believe hold their society together.
Yes. And it's definitely got that mentality which has come up in those situations of whether or not I am subduing truth is secondary.
Yes.
That is less important than what I am protecting.
So he is very much that science as conspiracy.
Yeah.
Of we are hiding the true information because of the way that we want our society to be. It is the thing that conspiracy theorists will accuse like NASA of.
Yes.
It's like, oh yeah, well they're hiding the truth because they want to, whatever.
Yeah.
In this case, it's interesting because Dr. Zaius's motives actually are, he's like, no, these people destroyed the planet, so we're hiding that truth so that no one digs into it and somehow leads to that happening again.
Yes.
Like, I am doing this to protect our society as we know it.
He believes this status quo is paramount.
Yes.
If this status quo changes, it could lead to something disastrous.
Yes. Which, of course, to get into the broader themes of the movie, is very fun because it means that at the end of the movie, when Dr. Zaius's true motives are revealed, it turns out that he's saying all the same things about humanity that Taylor was saying at the beginning of the movie. So like Dr. Zaius is the closest thing this movie has to a villain, but he's not villainous.
He's corrupt.
Yes.
And he's
an antagonist.
Yes, and he is callous and calculating.
Yes.
He is very much by any means necessary.
He is actively covering up, because there's a point in the Taylor first tries to write words for them in the dirt, and Dr. Zaius covers it up.
Yeah, he notices the bits of some letters that survived the scuffle.
Yes.
And scratches them out. It's such a good moment.
Yeah, it's great. So we have this interesting spread of different kinds of scientist characters, some who are in that sort of pure discovery and science, some who evoke the process of scientific learning and hypothesizing and debating, and we've got scientists as corrupt conspirator, which is a common trope in the way that we do movies, but also in the way we portray history.
Yes. Another thing I thought of in that relationship is that Cornelius is doing his archaeology, and he's also doing it kind of actively in opposition to the standards.
Yeah, there's a point where Dr. Zira starts saying, like, oh, hey, this guy, I found this human who might help prove your theories. And Cornelius is like, what, do you want me to get arrested?
Yep.
Because it is acknowledged that he is working on what the higher-ups consider heresy.
Yeah, when he presented his hypothesis, he was threatened with expulsion, basically.
And indeed, when they do eventually present Taylor to the ministry, I guess, they are charged with heresy.
Yep. And it's also revealed that he's been doing his archaeology in a forbidden area.
Yes.
So
he is pushing beyond what he's supposed to be doing.
But it's also interesting because he's trying to do it. It very much has the feeling of he's trying to change the system from within.
Yes, he's trying to do it by the book.
He's trying to work by their rules, but he's pushing the envelope and he's stretching it. And so he's breaking the rule here with the thought of, but if I find enough proof, it'll be worth it and they can't deny it.
Yes.
So surely they will accept it. So he's trusting the system even while he's kind of fighting the system.
Yes.
Which is a feeling that very much harkens to many historical scientists.
Absolutely. Yeah, this movie's scientists are kind of great. It has, some of them are very one-dimensional and we don't really get to know them much. But like Zira and Cornelius they're not necessarily great people. For their actions in the film, but as a portrayal of scientists and sort of scientific mentality, they are really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we've already started touching on some of this, moving on from the scientists themselves to the science.
Yes.
This is an interesting movie because there is actually quite a bit of science happening in the movie, both in terms of active activity, but also discussion. Just to sort of start with the baseline, before we get into the real ape stuff, the movie starts with a discussion of time dilation.
Yep.
And relativity, and Taylor saying, there's this new theory of when you travel at close to the speed of light, time slows down for you, which is awesome.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
That's for anybody unfamiliar with the physics, that's real.
Yeah, that's absolutely what the math shows.
Time dilation is a real thing that is supported by lots of study.
Yep.
Which leads to this hypothesis, which has been used in tons of science fiction.
Yes.
I don't know if this is one of the first ones to do it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because this was 1968, which is quite a bit after like Einstein's doing all of his Einstein stuff. But this movie is built on that premise is core to the plot of this movie.
Yeah.
The twist doesn't work without that premise.
It's also very neat, especially for a movie from the 60s, that the way they achieve time travel for their story to cast their people in the future is a actual way to time travel to the future.
It's not just like a Sound of Thunder where, we built a time machine. But no, you traveled in space for 2,000 years.
Yeah, and because you were traveling so fast, a year passed for you, but that's it. And I'm really impressed by that, because so often explanations for stuff like that in movies use sci-fi explanations because those are easy to come by and you can make them work however you want. You had to actually read some science for that. You had to actually look it up, and that's cool.
It's very cool. I also do kind of like that, Landon, one of the other scientists, is the one who doesn't believe it. He's like, well, we'll see, right? That's still just a theory. And Taylor is like, Taylor, just a real jerk of a person. Not a great... Taylor's got but Taylor's being very, like, rude to him about it.
Antagonistic.
But it's fun because that is left unresolved during that part of the movie, and then it doesn't come up again, and then the very end of the movie shows that, yes, in fact, time dilation is real. That is what happened.
Oh, yeah.
You are 2,000 years in the future.
Yes. And their first evidence is that they have a chronometer.
They have a clock, basically,
on the ship. And right before the ship sinks, Taylor gets a look at it and sees 2,000 years have passed.
Yeah, it's like 3978 or something.
And so that's the proof he's referring to of, I saw the clock before I got out. The theory's correct. The hypothesis is proven. Absolutely, we were out in space for 2,000 years.
Yes.
Which, it's neat to have the conversation. It's neat that the concept's used. It's also neat that they make a point of like, that I wondered whether or not if that theory is that hypothesis is true.
Yes. Then
it means that during this time we've been out here, already centuries have passed back on Earth. And I wonder, and that's why he says, I wonder if man still makes war against his brother.
Yes.
That I wonder in the time that has passed, if that's true, had things changed? And then makes the note of, turns out it looks like that's true. It's the questioning of a hypothesis and then proving of a hypothesis.
Yes, which is very cool. Speaking of the premise of the movie, one of the things that we talked about this after we watched it, one of the things I find so fun about this movie is that it is a decidedly 1960s way to portray an alien planet.
Yes.
That this movie as it exists wouldn't work. Like, the twist wouldn't work if you release this today, because this is a very, like, Star Trek, Star Wars, old-timey way of, every planet basically functions the same way as Earth. Alien species are basically all humans. So you can get away with, this is just another planet somewhere out in the universe that looks exactly like Earth. The only difference seems to be that on this planet, humans are wildlife and apes are the ones who are in charge.
Yes.
Which, like, yeah, in Star Trek, that would work. That would be perfectly viable. Where it's like, yeah, we found a planet. That's what's weird about it. Whereas these days, with, we're so accustomed to, like, Avatar and even, like, Guardians of the Galaxy, which is still doing that, but is intentionally putting some more alien vibes to it.
Yeah, well, like, even in the Star Wars cantina, at least there are non-humans running around.
Yes. This movie, I was thinking about, yes, I was thinking about, like, showing this to a child, to a young person today, and them going, so they're on Earth? It's like, well, yeah, but you're not supposed to know that.
Yeah, they just think it's an alien planet with English-speaking apes.
Yes. Yeah, and everybody speaks English.
Homo sapiens.
And a person today, like, especially a young person, would be like, why would that exist? Because it was the 60s, and that's what aliens were like.
It was reasonable for the idea that aliens would just be different versions of stuff here, being very much like things here, except for some weird twist.
Yes. And that speaks very interestingly to what audiences are accustomed to and what audiences will go along with.
Yep.
That it sets itself up to be more of a fantasy kind of scenario, like a Guardians of the Galaxy or a Star Wars, where it's still very, this is very, it's just different kinds of humans all over the place. Yeah. And then reveals itself to be much more of a, quote, hard sci-fi. Yes. Of like, no, this actually is not just a weird alternate Earth. This is a scientific thing that has happened. Yes. In a movie sort of way.
Yeah. Which is interesting. There is one note to give them some slack for the astronauts not figuring out immediately they're back on Earth, which I've always assumed that there was like a return program in the ship. They never explain why.
Before they leave the ship, he sends out a signal that's supposed to be like letting everyone back on Earth know that we've landed.
Yes.
But that's all we get about any planned interaction with Earth.
I always assume that it's just there was some pre-programmed, if something goes wrong, do a U-turn, head back to Earth.
Oh, sure.
And that's why the ship, because we never are told why the ship came back to Earth.
Yeah, we're told that something goes wrong because the ship crashes.
Yeah, it lands in the water, and they weren't supposed to land in the water.
Wasn't supposed to do that. And one of the pods, their cryogenic sleeping pods, got damaged, which is why Dr. Stewart doesn't survive.
Yes.
So they wake up on the ship to everything has gone wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't actually get an explanation of what it was that went wrong.
Or why they didn't end up at the other planet anyway.
Yes.
Why they turned around. But they do mention there's no moon, which at one point they throw out. We also don't get an explanation of if there is what happened to the moon, or if maybe they're just walking around on the new moon nights where there's no visible moon.
That's true. I did have that thought this time because they're like, yeah, there's no moon. I'm like, did we blow up the moon?
Probably.
Is that? Yeah, that sounds like what we.
Well, it was during a martial arts tournament.
That's true. That's right. Yeah, well, they had to. Well, they had to stop the apes.
Exactly. It's the start of it.
That's how you stop the apes.
Don't worry. I know the war looks bad now, but I saw how we stopped the apes. Just give me a big enough nuke, and I'm gonna stop these apes. Oh, that didn't work? Oh, I guess.
I'm so sorry to the 95% of our listeners who are incredibly confused. I can't even. It's Dragon Ball. No. We're referencing Dragon Ball.
Wait, I know what to do. Cut off their tails. What do you mean they don't have tails? the great apes.
They're one step ahead of us.
Oh no.
So anyway, another real sort of major scientific concept that runs throughout this movie is, we see this with Dr. Zira, this animals in captivity.
Yeah.
So the movie sets this up very intentionally to be like, these humans are being treated like animals.
Yes.
Right? They get brought into this facility. They're being kept in cages.
They're culled. Their numbers are kept under control by killing them.
Yes.
Like, during that human capture sequence, a bunch of them are also just murdered.
Yeah, they're hunted.
Yes.
In addition, and then the ones that are preserved are kept for study and experimentation.
Yes.
So there is a clear parallel being drawn here of animals being experimented on, being mistreated.
There's an animal rights and animal and human care motif and commentary going on through much of the film.
Yeah. So as we were saying, Dr. Zira is the nicest ape that we see in regard to her treatment of humans, but she's still keeping them in cages and experimenting on them, and they're doing like surgery and stuff on them. And the other apes, like there's I guess the guard who helps around, who shows up with the cages and stuff, is a real jerk to the humans. And they're like blasting them with hoses, and they're doing all sorts of like cruel treatment, which is the point. The point is to say, yeah, look, it's humans being treated the way we treat animals.
Mm-hmm. Which is interesting because some of it gets kind of exaggerated, notably once Taylor starts acting up.
Yes.
Starts acting differently. When he first talks, they punish him. And there's a moment where one of them is disturbed, like is hitting him with a hose, and it says, "Shut up, you freak," because the idea of them talking is disturbing to him. It would be like a dog coming at me like, "Hello, I need your help."
Yes.
Would be
and then it's
weird.
Like if you kicked that dog.
Yes.
So it's interesting because it is definitely leaning hard on animals in captivity are being mistreated, which isn't a fair take on all cases of captive animals or even animal experimentation. But this is very clearly a society that is not concerned with the humane treatment of the creatures in their care. And it's not clear if that is how they treat all animals.
Yes.
Or if that is specifically the way that because they have horses.
Yep.
Presumably they're taking care of their horses pretty okay.
Yep.
But humans in particular this society has a vendetta.
Yeah. And there's kind of a Venn diagram that comes to mind with it. So one part is what we've already talked about, that, some apes do have a vendetta against humans.
Yes.
They actively want the humans to be subjugated and kept down. But also a lot of the visuals and portrayals of how everything's happening is very much like the first zoos that were created in like Europe. The cages even very much look like where it's concrete bars and then bars surrounding a concrete slab that they're kept in.
There's no enrichment or anything.
For anyone who's not aware, that is what the first zoos looked like. Mm-hmm. Just concrete slabs with iron bars put into them, and then a gorilla or a tiger and like maybe some straw and like water and stuff. They were really horrific. Yes. Like nightmare fuel in how bad they were.
And there have been cases of animal experimentation, especially earlier on, that were not at all humane.
Yes, that were absolutely bordered on, and for sure at times were cruel.
Yes.
If not for the sake of cruelty, definitely not caring whether it happened.
So there is some parallel here to just prejudice against other species.
Yeah.
In a way that is very, you gave the example of a dog earlier, which drives home what's strange about it. But if we use the parallel of like a wolf or a snake, there is a parallel to this is a society in which it is a cultural norm.
Yes.
To be cruel to this particular species of wildlife, which is true in the real world.
Yes.
It is a cultural norm to be cruel to snakes or to be cruel to sharks.
Well, and another thing that aligns the way the movie's set up very much with like slightly earlier human societies is they even make a distinction that apes have a soul.
Yes.
Humans don't. Which is, for a long time, and still certain people today, was a very widely held distinction of, that's why humans are different. We have a soul, the rest of animals don't.
Yes.
So therefore they are definitively a step down.
Humans don't go to heaven.
Yeah, animals...
Yes, the apes, in the case of the Planet of the Apes.
Exactly.
Yes, humans don't go to heaven.
All horses go to heaven, no humans.
Horses, great.
Like, it's this interesting view because there's definitely a lot of modern criticism, but it's definitely a society that is set up to mirror like that. What would that have been, like the 18th century or early 19th century Europe of the science the science halls and the early zoos and all of that sort of stuff.
This is science without ethics.
Yeah. It very much harkens back to that.
There's a lot of commentary to be had here about how we treat other species that we share the planet with, which again fits in with the themes of the movie of how humans treat the planet.
Yeah.
And the idea is, they destroyed it.
Yes. Another little note that I really like about that relationship between ape and human is that even after they like befriend Taylor and like oh, you're a person.
Yeah. He gives them his name.
Yeah, we're talking, we're having conversations, we're trying to help you in the way that we think is best to try to help, like by standing up for you at your hearing and stuff, and eventually break him out to keep him safe. But even after they get out, like they are no longer treating him like an animal. Like they allow him to be out of the cage. He no longer wears a collar. He gets to hold a gun like them and everything. But there's still moments where they're like, Taylor, you're not in charge here.
Yes.
Like, what do you think you're doing bossing us around? And it's definitely got a little bit of that of, I don't like how big of pants you think you're wearing.
Yes.
Which is definitely, once again, like, if a dog started talking, we would absolutely be empathetic to it, but I definitely think there would be people who it's got the bicentennial thing of like, what do you mean you want a job?
Yes. There's nothing in the rule book that says a dog can't be an accountant.
Right? Yeah.
Well, they stop treating him like an animal, but they don't treat him like their own species.
Yes, they don't treat him like an ape.
Yes, exactly.
I just remembered this. The best example of that is when they give him different clothes and it's more gross clothes.
Yes.
And he's like, you couldn't give me anything better. They're like, what, you wanted a new suit? He goes, these smell. And they go, humans smell.
Yes. Well, there's the moment at the end where they're parting ways and Taylor asks Dr. Zero for a kiss. He's like, I'd love a kiss goodbye. Because... and she's like, but you're so ugly.
Yep.
Well, and they also have the line.
The best line of the movie.
So the guys wake up in the ship and they all have full beards.
Because they've been in the chambers longer than they expected.
Yes. Their hair doesn't appear to have grown all that much.
No,
although I guess it's only been like a year.
Yeah.
For them. So, but full beards. And then once Taylor starts getting some of his autonomy back, he shaves his beard off. And Cornelius is like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
And he says, well, where I'm from, this is what we do. And he goes, somehow it makes you look less intelligent.
Yep.
Like, it's funny. They're all funny because they're flipping it on its head. But it's also, these are people who have prejudice against this, what they consider wildlife.
Yes. Yep.
Speaking of towards the end of the movie, the place they're all going to when they go off with Taylor is the archaeological site that Dr. Cornelius has been working on, which this is really cool because it's in a cave. Cornelius explains there are multiple layers in the sedimentary deposits here in this cave. And the reason that he's so excited about the potential evidence that he's finding here is because he shows that in the lower levels of the deposit, the older levels of the deposit, there are signs of advanced human society.
Yes.
There's like tools and items and objects that they don't even know what they are.
Yeah.
Taylor comes in and he's like, these are dentures.
Yep.
This is, I forget what else was in there. It was like, there's a doll.
Yeah, a heart valve.
That's it. Yeah, it was a heart valve. But then in the upper levels, that's no longer present.
Yeah, and that when you go down through the layers, they get expectedly less advanced, like stone tools and simpler things. But then suddenly you get to a layer with a society that is as advanced as their own, if not more so.
Yes, which isn't what
should happen.
The history should be, right?
Yes.
It's like, yes, we arose, right? We should see that history of apes becoming more and more advanced, but we've got evidence of an advanced, well, they don't necessarily know that it's human, but a more advanced society before that.
With no apes in it. They do make a mention.
With no apes in it. We don't have evidence of apes. And then when Dr. Zaius comes in and he's like, well, keep digging, you'll find the apes.
Yes.
Clearly, there are apes here. And there's a great moment, because again, Dr. Zaius is trying to cover it up. There's a great moment where someone, I think Nova, is playing with the doll. Mm-hmm. We haven't mentioned Nova
Yes.
Because Nova is kind of uncomfortable to mention. Nova is a character who is one of the humans, the native humans, who are mute, who is given to Taylor to be his mate, which is an interesting moment because it's weird and uncomfortable, but that's the point. The point is we are treating these humans the way we treat animals. The part where it gets really awful is that Taylor's like, okay.
He's kind of into it.
Yeah, which is... But Nova, because Taylor insisted that he brings Nova to the cave with him because...
Well, it's his now.
That's, yeah. But she's playing with the doll, and then the doll starts making... Mama. Yes. And Taylor's like, so Dr. Zaius, why would apes make a doll of a human that talks? And he, like, throws the doll at him or something. So there is this, like, fascinating usage of archaeological science at the sort of this pivot point of how they interpret the history of the area.
Well, and I also love it because it feels like a very reasonable and plausible way that if we did descend from, if there was a Dwemer from the Skyrim of there used to be a society that was leaps and bounds past where we are now, it would probably take a while, unless there were still just massive monuments of it left. If it was eradicated for the most part and only left in disparate archaeological sites, it probably would take a while for a society to accept that and even understand the evidence they're seeing.
Yeah.
Because for so long, you've been working off the idea that you're the only society that's ever been here. You don't have any reason to suspect an ancient, effectively alien one.
Yes.
So when you find it, it would be a curiosity and a bizarre mystery.
Yeah, and this is part of where Dr. Cornelius's heretical theories are coming in, is he's saying there was some sort of advanced society. The scriptures are wrong, is basically what he's saying. He's like, we have written history of our culture. I found archaeological evidence that seems to... Not only does it show a more advanced society earlier, but the dating in this cave, and we're not actually given how it's dated.
Yes.
There is a moment where Dr. Zaius, one of the ways that he argues against it is he says, well, your dating techniques are wrong.
Yeah, I think he says, like, some of my scientists have taken great issue with your dating techniques.
Yes. But Cornelius's dating techniques put this advanced society at earlier than the written history starts.
Mm-hmm. So it's a really well done way to work in the twist that the movie is centered on and building up to, but also using science in a really cool way to do it.
Yes. It's there's a lot of cool science in this movie.
Yeah. Oh, that's one of the other things. Zira's work is looking at humans to study their brains to try to advance brain surgery in apes.
Yes.
Which is another one of those of like, she is experimenting on them, but she's doing it for medical research.
Yes.
And
which is another parallel of what we do in the real world.
Yep.
Well, in the modern.
Yes, yeah, like that definitely is.
Before before we destroy it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and speaking of the parallels with the real world and the sort of scientific, the culture and philosophy around science, the other thing that I think is really notable in the way that this film portrays science is that there is a lot of very obvious paralleling of science denial and science conspiracy, where and we've talked about some of this already, but there's that scene where they're on trial, basically.
Yeah.
They've brought their argument before the ministry, and it's this incredible scene of the ministers using science to try to disprove what's happening and deny. And some of it is very much like there is one of the ministers gestures at Cornelius and it is deriding him for his theory of evolution.
Yes.
The idea that apes came from human ancestors, which is a very obvious parallel. Same thing with Dr. Zaius questioning the dating methods. These are very obvious parallels of using the veneer of science and scientific debate to deny evidence of scientific concepts.
Yes.
There's also a moment in that it's so good.
Yep.
Where one of the ministers is given the option to cross-examine basically Taylor, and it's like, let's prove, this is your chance to prove that you are actually as intelligent as an ape.
Yes.
And then starts quizzing him with philosophy questions.
Yes, scripture questions.
Why are apes the only ones with a soul?
Yeah.
What are the number one tenets of ape society?
Yeah. What is the evidence that apes have a divine spark?
Yes, exactly. And Taylor's like, I don't know your culture. And he's like, of course you don't.
Of course you don't. A
Yes.
human wouldn't.
And so it's this very interesting portrayal of effectively pseudoscience, pseudoscientific ideas at the heart of this culture.
Well, it makes me think about things I've heard and learned about, like, especially the earliest like IQ tests, that many of them would be like, what is the correct sailing rig for a sailboat?
Yes.
It's like, well, yeah, because it's assuming that any intelligent person owns a sailboat or has been on one.
Yes.
And like, I think it also had like etiquette questions and stuff that it was very much, and like, that's still the issue with like a lot of IQ tests today where.
Yes. It's assuming a certain background.
Yes. That any intelligent person in my society and of my standing.
Yes.
Would know almost all these answers. You must be an idiot if you don't. Yeah, it's very interesting. They also have a great moment where Zira's nephew, if I remember right, where he's like, they're arguing with Dr. Zaius, and he's like, why must you hide the truth? Why must progress stand still? And it's this really interesting, the young generation wanting the progress, and the older generation thinking that the progress is dangerous.
Yes. And
the movie sets it up in a way where you can see why Dr. Zaius feels this way. But it's another one of those comparisons of you're actively holding back our society changing, and that's not fair.
Yes.
Especially to us, the young, who are going to take it over someday.
And indeed, in that same scene, Dr. Zaius has the cave destroyed.
Yep.
That his order is, no, destroy this archaeological site. This information must not get out.
Yeah, he lets Taylor go with the assumption that, he'll die out there.
Yeah, he's just going to go off and die.
And take care of it for us. Blow up the cave. You both are going to prison.
Yes. Yeah, and then, absolutely. He's like, you're absolutely arrested for heresy because you're trying to dismantle our society.
And you know too much, no.
Yes.
You have to be fully discredited. So it ends with that ape society will stay the way it is, at least for a while longer.
And then, of course, Taylor rides off along the coast, taking Nova with him, I guess, to go die with him out in the middle of nowhere. And at the end of the movie is he finds a destroyed Statue of Liberty.
Yes.
And goes,
I'm home.
I'm home. And then he starts, his very famous line, you blew it up, darn you to heck. And that is the reveal that, humans are this is Earth after some sort of apocalyptic scenario.
Dr. Zaius was right about what happened. Whether or not he's right about why he's doing what he's doing is up for moral debate, but he
knows.
His history is correct.
Yes, exactly. So it's a really scientifically dense film.
It really is.
There's a lot in there that is meant to parallel things in the real world. There's a variety of scientific depictions. It's very cool. It's a very cool product.
Well, and it does it in such a way that it definitely feels like there are certain criticisms being made of our society.
The movie has some opinions.
Yes. But it also doesn't, it feels like with many of the topics being brought up that the movie is presenting a debate and a discussion, really, and more of things that will prompt discussion and exploring that discussion, but not then falling on and this is the lesson you need to take away. It's
right. These
are all things you should think about. And it's important that you think about them. Here are some ways to think about them, which is a really very refreshing. Like, you end that movie and there's no way you can't be talking about, interesting. Like, that makes me wonder about this, or...
Yes, what is the philosophy? Oh, whose side, or who do you think was in the right?
It is a really good exploration of various ideas, like a lot of different ideas.
There's a lot of science philosophy.
Yeah.
Well, and it does it in a way that is different from even to, call on one of our top of our list, Jurassic Park, which is a movie that has a lot of interesting science and scientists and scientific topics and discussions, but it also has a character whose job it is to routinely look into the camera and tell the audience a message.
Yeah, condemn these scientific practices.
And for better or worse is doing it with leagues more charisma than any other of the other actors in the movie.
Yep.
So this is such a really, I feel like we could talk about the science in this movie. Yeah. There's so much here. Listeners, if there's other scientific notes that you can think of about this movie, feel free to let us know. Now, for the most part, the goal of Silver Screen Science is to discuss the science and the scientific concepts, not just to nitpick and rant and whatever about things that they got right or wrong. But that is also fun to do. So at the end of every Silver Screen Science episode, we like to give ourselves just a little few minutes for mini rants, an opportunity for us to pick something about the science in the movie that bugs us so that we can go off about it. We'll go off about it.
Mine is less of a rant and more of a question. How did the Statue of Liberty get there? Because when they find it, it's on the beach.
It's also like, it's either buried or it's just like the top half of it. Yeah. It's not nearly as tall as it should be.
Yes. And it is like leaning up against a cliff. And it's right up at shore. Like they're going to have trouble getting around it to keep going along the beach. What happened? Did it get blown up and tossed?
And it just...
over to the land? Is it supposed to be that it like washed ashore?
Sure.
And just somehow
it got destroyed
floated?
And got washed over. I guess it could be that the water level in New York Harbor has dropped.
That's all right. That actually is a reasonable one, because the only other one I thought of initially was like, are they suggesting that like tectonics and geologic movements have changed so much
in 2,000 years?
In 2,000 years, but that actually water level dropping or something does make a lot of sense.
New York Harbor is directly connected to the sea, so it is not separated, to my knowledge. And I also don't know how deep New York Harbor is. So that my explanation might require a global sea level drop.
Of such a degree.
Of quite a lot.
Well, all that water went wherever the moon went.
They had to use that hydrogen.
Well, when the moon left, it took all its tides with it.
Just all the zoink. Which is also the opposite, obviously, of what we know a human-caused apocalypse on planet Earth. The human-caused destruction of the Earth is rising sea level.
Yes. Well, we nuclear winter, and that lost all the ice caps.
That's true.
But yeah,
there you
go. They're just like, we blew everything up, and the Statue of Liberty's here now.
Now it's over here.
It's like, but wait.
We moved it.
How?
She was running away from the war and she didn't make it very far.
This is as far as she slumped against the cliff.
We're assuming that she's in New York. Maybe there's much more of a detail. Maybe someone stole the Statue of Liberty.
No, they're in Las Vegas.
That's why it's so small. Why is there so much water?
Global warming.
The middle of the... Oh, there you go. Yeah, we did it. The Western Interior Seaway is having a comeback.
I'm back, baby.
My mini rant is much more about science and a little bit about ethics. So, in the beginning of the movie, there were 4 astronauts on the ship. Dr. Stewart dies.
Yes.
She is not anywhere else in the movie. The 3 men go off and all also meet tragic ends.
Yep.
There is a point in the movie where Taylor is explaining, I think to Nova, who doesn't understand what he's saying, about the mission. And he mentions that Dr. Stewart was meant to be our new Eve.
Yep.
The implication being that this group of astronauts were going to populate.
Yeah, colonize.
Yeah, they start a society here, and Dr. Stewart was going to be the one having the babies. First of all, gross.
And he says, with our
hot and eager help. I'm pretty sure is what he says. Yeah, absolutely. Taylor's not. But setting aside the ethics of that situation for a moment and just talking about logistics, that's a terrible plan.
That's so dumb.
For populating an area. First of all, there's 4 of you.
Yep.
That is an extremely low amount of genetic diversity. You're going to have lots of problems with inbreeding. But also, you only have one person who can get pregnant. Mm-hmm. Is your plan just to take turns once a year making a baby with this person?
Yep.
If you want to repopulate, you want to bring like a whole fleet of people.
Yes.
And realistically, you want way more people who can get pregnant.
Absolutely.
Than people who can get someone else pregnant.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's gonna take you forever.
Well, and it's like, not only is that like schedule-wise.
yes, schedule-wise, that's ridiculous.
But we get our mitochondrial DNA from the people who can get pregnant.
Yes.
Like, you'll also get more genetic diversity that way. So it was such a bad idea from the get-go. No wonder your spaceship broke. Dumb people made this mission.
Yeah. This was the prequel to this is Idiocracy.
Yes.
And that's who sent the spaceship up there. It's like a little throwaway line. Mm-hmm. That feels like maybe no one really thought much about it, that they just sort of put it in there. But the other thing about it is that the implication of that is that Taylor, Landon, and Dodge would have been the leaders of this new society.
Yeah.
And Taylor, who is a character whose main defining characteristic is how much he hates people.
Yeah, that he's a nihilist, effectively.
Yeah, and he's a misanthrope. Seems like a terrible choice for a person to be in charge of your new society.
Let alone a father.
Yes, yeah, right? A father of who knows how many. Each of them's 3 years apart from each other.
Yes.
That's just Also, you can't control what the babies are going to be. Mm-mm. You might end up with no option for more babies in the future.
Yep.
This might be your one. That's a terrible.
It was just
That's a really bad plan.
Bad plan.
So those are our mini rants. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention this before when we were talking about animal treatment is that they also turn the humans into exhibits.
Yes, yeah, they taxidermy them.
They taxidermy humans and put them on display. I don't have anything else to say about that. It would have gone great back when we talked about it.
But yeah, we see a ape museum. Which, all in all, looked like a pretty cool museum.
It looked pretty cool. It was kind of low attendance.
Yes, it was.
It was a slow day.
It was a weekday or something.
Sure. Yeah, this is a school day.
Yeah.
Listeners, thank you for joining us for this discussion of the original Planet of the Apes film. If you'd like to hear more about our thoughts, check out on our Patreon More Thoughts, where we will leave the science discussion behind and just talk about the movie itself and our thoughts about the movie and our experience watching it. Also, this is the first of 3 episodes of Silver Screen Science we will be releasing during April this year. Next episode, we will visit the remake of Planet of the Apes from 2001, the Tim Burton one.
Yeah.
Which I have not seen yet. And I fully expect that it's going to be weird.
I'm eager to rewatch it. It's been a while.
Yeah. These 3 episodes will come out the first 3 weeks of the month, and then we will do a Silver Screen Science live stream on April 26th, Saturday, so people can join us and just chit-chat about movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So join us for all of those cool things we got coming up in the future.
I'm very excited to wrap this one, to go through all of these. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Help, the human's about to escape.
Zayas, Dr. Zayas.
Help me, Dr. Zayas.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.